This meeting is being recorded.
We're all good. Okay, fabulous. We have some new faces on today, so let me say a very warm hello. I am Kim Finney, and along with my longtime colleague and partner in crime, we lead the Royal Youth Catalyst work, although some of you have known us for many years before that in our old days of our Youth Build hats, Youth Build USA hats. So we're thrilled to have all of you. And Kathy will join as soon as she can. She is on the road today and headed down to spend some time with her dad. So I thought that unless, Jess, you have another way you want to do this, I was going to quickly have folks go around and just do a quick introduction of who they are, where they're located, and program they're with. Does that work? So fabulous.
Yep, that's great.
I'll circle back and introduce and turn it over to you. So if it works for you all, I'm just going to call you out in the order I see on the screen, because it's a Brady Bunch moment. If you can just, you don't need to give a whole program description, but just say, who you are, where you're from, program, school, organization, whatever that may be that you're with. And, if you have anything else that you're just dying to share, then don't let us, don't let me stop you from that. But do try to be mindful that, time is of the essence, and we all know how I can talk. Mindy, you are the first box beside me, so can I ask you to jump in?
Sure. My name is Mindy Rickabaugh. I'm the coordinator of reintegration services here at Goodwill of the Southern Alleghenies. We are in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Western Central PA is our footprint. We have had Youth Build for the last 15 years, but we are really heavily, our footprint is now really in a lot of reentry work.
Laura, you are next on my screen, if you would be willing.
Sure.
I know it's weird.
I'm Laura Fighter. I'm the case manager in Helena, Montana for Youth Build. And I can't get my camera to work today.
We can see you. You look wonderful and welcome.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Phaedra.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Phaedra Robinson. I'm with the Southern Rural Black Women's Initiative. We are a nonprofit based in Jackson, Mississippi, but we are centered in the Black Belts, which are counties across Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. And we run the UNITA Blackwell Institute for Female Leadership for Black girls across our region.
It's always so understated the way you say it all, Phaedra. It's like, and then you follow them on social media and your newsletters and everything. And it's like, no, they are absolutely doing the hardest work in the trenches, changing the world. And twice on the last couple of calls, you've been trying to join and then be like, so I'm sorry, I have to go into the courthouse right now, because Phaedra's a lawyer, by the way, and fight for some sort of school issue or disaster tied to young people issue. So thrilled that you can join us today. Thank you.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
Mike Hogg.
Hey, y'all. I'm Mike from Partners for Rural Impact in Berea, Kentucky, and we do direct services with kids in Appalachia, East Texas, Missouri, a little bit of everywhere. It's good to be with you all today.
Thank you, Mike. Awesome to see you. David. We'll tag in our other Appalachian.
Okay, David Messer, Youth Build North Central West Virginia, and I'm the case manager here. And we're located in Elkins, West Virginia.
Great to see you, David. Thanks for joining us. Karen.
Hi, everybody. Karen Kane in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Youth Build, Youth Works, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm the counseling director here at Youth Works.
We're totally thrilled you can join us too, Karen. Haven't seen you in a bit, so awesome to have you on.
Thank you.
Let's see. The wonderful good people at Chaba, Kathy and Megan, do you want to hop on?
Sure. I am Kathy Taylor. I am the Executive Director for California Heritage Youth Build Academy, Chiba, and we are just about, well, a little over an hour from the Oregon border. So we are way up north. And my esteemed colleague, Megan, I'll let her jump in. I just wanted to mention to you, Kim, too, that the two Lauras got crossed. So you missed one of them, just to keep that in mind. I think one did the opposite. So anyway, keep that in mind. I'm out.
Sorry. Sorry, I'll get the other Laura. Sorry about that. Sorry. I see that now in my lower box. Apologies. Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan. I am the project coordinator at California Heritage Youth Build Academy. And like Kathy said, we're far northern California. So
Welcome. Jolene.
Hi, I'm Jolene Ortega. I'm with Panhandle Regional Planning Commission in Amarillo, Texas. We are the fiscal administrators for Workforce Solutions in Amarillo, and we are currently partnering with Beth Gunn with Amarillo Area Foundation, and she introduced me to this group.
We are so thrilled to have you. Welcome aboard. You know, mostly we do a pretty good job of being organized and, so we hope you'll stick around. Beth, why don't you jump in and introduce yourself? And thanks for extending the invitation.
Absolutely. I was excited to do it. And I'm really excited about this training. I think it's going to be really cool. My name is Beth Gunn. I'm the grants program officer, excuse me, at the Amarillo Area Foundation. We serve the top 26 counties of the Texas Panhandle, 24 of which are rural. And as part of our higher education strategy, we are kind of having a focus on opportunity youth. So that's why I'm here.
Thrilled to have you with us. Laura, I hope I get this right, Laura Fader, the other Laura that I missed. Apologies, Laura, if I've just mispronounced your name.
I'm the other Laura Seals. But I'll jump in because it's good timing. I'm also
sorry, I completely messed it up. Sorry, because one of you has your camera on, the other doesn't. My bad. Sorry.
Yeah. So I'm the assistant program director with the West Texas A&M AmeriCorps program, and we're working with Amarillo Area Foundation, also serving the Texas Panhandle. Thanks, Beth.
Fantastic. Welcome. Abby Ritter.
Hello. My name is Abby Ritter. I use she, they pronouns. I'm the youth advisory specialist for the Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living, or APRIL. Did I miss anything?
No, that totally works. Allison.
I'm also with WT AmeriCorps. I'm a member manager, and I work with Laura Seals.
Wonderful. Thrilled to have you all. Did I miss anyone? I don't think so. So if I did, we'll tag them in. And otherwise, Jess, I'm just going to do a quick introduction, and then you can share with yourself whatever you want. And I will turn it over to you. The usual good, while we are hopefully welcoming in our informalities on this call, and in part because many of you have known each other for years upon years. For the folks newly joining us, please take the humor in the informalities is truly meant to be, welcoming to all, and we're thrilled to have you. But as always, if you need something during any of our calls or sessions, use chat. You can also email me or text me on the side. I always, keep an eye on that. If you have to hop off or whatever you need to do, come back in, it's your learning. We completely understand. We're thrilled to have you. And for the folks that are joining us for the first time, you should now have the ongoing Zoom link, but I can make sure you're added to these calls. But we meet once a month on this Thursday slot every month, and we try to rotate between addressing topics in a more formal way, like with Jess joining us today for this session, or Mindy in the last session, and then also just allowing time for people to catch up in peer exchange and those kinds of good conversations. So our next call will likely be one, because we've had a few trainings in a row, so our next call will likely be just let's catch up, let's share, kind of a loosely facilitated call. In the meantime, you're always welcome to say, hey, could you find us more information about this, or any idea of what we could do about X problem we're having? You're also welcome to actually do what we call a peer consultancy, which is not as formal as it sounds, but just really make sure that we build in giving you the time and space on a call to present, whether it's a challenge, help with a brainstorm, an opportunity, absolute chaos thing that has just happened, any kind of anything, right? That you're just like, maybe, I'm sort of out of tricks in my toolkit, or, capacity in my own brain, but maybe if I bring it to the group, I can put it out there and get some feedback. And so we are also always happy to let you use this space. And there's really pretty much no topic that isn't a good one, and that this group, which is a massive collection of experts and perspectives, hasn't proved helpful. So today we're thrilled to have Jess Gropen join us. Jess is, I believe I've got your title right, a senior research scientist with CAST. You all may recall that a few months ago, we had Allison Driscoll join us from CAST and share an overview of the work they are doing under, I call it a department, I think CAST calls it something else, but under AIM, around accessible education materials, and just the pieces. And good conversation from you all with Allison happened from that, particularly surfacing this topic of the challenges of self-regulation and executive functioning. And we all know that those are day in and day out challenges, that regardless what hat you're wearing, if we're doing work, honestly, just with me, myself in a room with none of you, I'm still working on my own executive functioning and self-regulation. And it's going to be a lifelong battle, or challenge, or opportunity in a positive reframe. But certainly when we have young people in the room, we know this is an issue. But when we have opportunity youth, and to really ground this in what you all were raising, because it's not like this is your first rodeo, in this time period with all the issues going on and the coming out of COVID, or however you want to frame it up, this is an extra hard challenge. And Allison proposed that we connect with Jess, and this is Jess's entire wheelhouse, both as an educator and a trainer, and your research. So Jess, we are just unbelievably grateful to have you here today. Take the time to join this group, and particularly to come and speak to us as an audience that are working with rural and Native young people and opportunity youth, because there's no great glamour or headlights or main stage or any of that when you come and join and do this kind of work. So we're really, really grateful to have you. Thank you, Jess. So without further ado.
Thank you so much, Kim. Really appreciate that introduction. I think I'm glad that Allison connected us. And, I think in general, I do hope that you keep connections with CAST. And also I would say especially with the workforce group. You mentioned AIM, which does a lot of great work around accessibility of educational materials. I've worked with that group. But I would say workforce development, Sam Johnston, Amanda Bastoni, just, they've done quite a bit of work, as you know, with Youth Build and with Opportunity. Now, this talk, I should say, is actually, it's part of the UDL and higher education series. So there's some things that may or may not apply if we're talking about Opportunity Youth. But I think in general, when we're talking about self-regulation or executive functions, it generally does apply. These are, as you said, lifelong issues, right? And I can certainly point to myself. People sometimes assume that I'm really good at self-regulation because I study it, but that's not the truth. The truth is I am painfully aware of my own struggles with self-regulation. That's why I study it. So, and I think that's true of a lot of people. And Opportunity Youth are facing special challenges, not only because of their circumstances, but also because of where they are in life. We know that they are, as we'll get into a little bit, executive functions really, which are kind of in the frontal part of the brain, they don't really mature until you're, well into your 20s. And so, in fact, there's quite a bit of maturation that happens during adolescence. And, it's at that point where Opportunity Youth may be especially vulnerable to risky kinds of behaviors, where the kind of resources they need to make responsible decisions aren't quite there yet. So it helps, in fact, to remind them and give them support for making those decisions. And because they don't have that's not quite all together yet for them. So anyway, that's a bit of a preamble. I'm going to share my screen and go through some slides. As I do, I will not be able to monitor the chat. So if someone could do that, and just feel free to interrupt me, because the more interactive, the better. I don't, you can interrupt me mid-sentence, it's fine. I'm happy to have it. I'd rather have a discussion than hear myself talk. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And hopefully you can everyone see that? Okay. If there are issues seeing things, I can try to zoom in or try to do something to help you see what's going on. These, I think a version of these slides were also forwarded, slightly different, but close enough. And I'm happy with those being shared out. I don't think the differences are major. Some of the dates may be different on what I shared, and maybe some title slides, but the content is going to be similar, and so it should be fine. The other thing I want to say before I start is I noticed some people joining from Texas. The reason I'm mentioning that is because we've started a 5-year project in Aldine, Texas, outside of Houston, to do social emotional learning work with 4th and 5th graders in that system. And the name of the project is Circle Up. And I may mention some things from that project as we go, because we are engaged in lots of new learning, and it's exciting. And some of that will apply to a wider audience. So let me go ahead and start. This is going to be focused on addressing self-regulation through universal design for learning. As we start, maybe take a quick pulse check. How are we feeling today? From a 1, a little bit of a sad face, to a 5. Feel free to put your happy face. Put a number if you feel like sharing in the chat. I'll take a chat. Okay. Okay, we see some neutrals and some people who are more towards the happy spectrum, end of the spectrum. That's good. I'm glad. I'll try to say things that make you feel even happier. But it's always good to check in and to keep perspective and make sure you feel you're aware of what you're feeling. Being aware of what you're feeling and actually being able to label it in a fine-grained way, it turns out that's a very effective strategy in terms of emotion regulation and just having some control over what you're feeling. All right, so this is a quick introduction slide. I am a senior research scientist at CAST. The picture is a little bit frightening. I apologize. I think I had too much coffee before taking that photo. I am a cognitive scientist by training, trained at MIT. I taught for about 10 years at McGill University in Montreal. Mostly I was in the psychology department, so I taught a lot of cognitive psychology. My interests are around executive function, self-regulation, motivation, and student engagement. So some of what I talk about today is going to be in a more formal education setting, but a lot of it is going to be just about understanding the way all of this works, and it will apply in lots of different settings. So the goals for today are to describe why it matters to support students' executive function and self-regulation. We're going to define and describe executive function and self-regulation, and finally provide strategies for addressing common threats to executive function. So basically, why, what, and how. And because it's a 2-hour block, I am hoping that we have plenty of time afterwards to just have a discussion and maybe get a little bit more into some of the strategies, some of the nuances. Any questions before I launch in?
What does stress mean?
Okay. I hear a little bit of background. I don't think that's directed at me. So I'll just keep moving. So let's talk about why. Why should we care about executive function and self-regulation? Well, here is an example. This is from the CAST website. It's about online learning. And it's a short little video. This is one that's again, in a more formal context, but I think you'll see that there's plenty here that's useful. As you look at this, think about why Andrew is having trouble learning online, how it's different from his experience during the second semester. That'll make sense as you watch it. And have you faced the challenge of supporting students or opportunity youth like Andrew? Let me go ahead and, oops, sorry, not what I wanted to do. Please let me know if you can hear the sound. If not, I may need to reshare, but we'll try it.
We cannot hear the sound.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me stop and reshare. I forgot to click the magic button.
UDL on campus, Universal Design for Learning in Higher Education.
Executive functioning in online learning environments. This is Andrew. He recently entered his second year of community college as an economics major. Like any learner, Andrew had to develop goals, prioritize, plan and organize, and problem solve as he navigated through his coursework and applied learning strategies. His first college semester went well, as long as he was in contact with his professor, who often helped him plan his assignments and strategize when problems arose. Andrew often received feedback during class time from his instructor as to whether or not his conceptual understanding was accurate, and this prompted him to reflect upon his learning. After 3 weeks into the second semester, Andrew faced new challenges, as 2 of his courses were online. The course content itself did not appear to be much more difficult than his first semester, yet there was a significant difference in his performance and attitude. Without face-to-face interaction with an instructor, Andrew had to navigate through the course with more autonomy. The scaffolds and supports that are typically present in a face-to-face classroom were not present in the online environment. Andrew noticed that he had a harder time moving through the course at an appropriate pace. His understanding was not as clear as the first semester. Andrew's scores were lower than the first semester, and he felt overwhelmed. He was considering withdrawing from the course. He recognized that this would put him behind on receiving his degree. There are many ways in which we can support a learner like Andrew that will help him succeed in an online learning environment.
All right.
How to kill all mosquitoes in the area in 90 seconds. This simple but brilliant trick you can do tonight to eliminate all mosquitoes around you is taking America by storm.
I don't think that was meant to be part of the presentation. All right. So maybe take a second just to think about that a little bit. Especially as you've all experienced some of the youth that you've been working with, really perhaps undergoing, you know, as with all of us, undergoing these changes during the pandemic. And maybe now that it seems to have passed, you've been able to reflect on it. What sorts of things did you notice with the youth that you worked with? Were there did you see issues come up that hadn't come up before around planning, around goal setting, around any of the things that maybe seemed to be easier before? feel free to put something in chat or just speak up. Does this resonate at all?
I was kind of working with two different populations of students pre and post pandemic, but the students who were also our AmeriCorps members working with after pandemic, there seemed to be more students who were less likely to take initiative or come ask for help or come like engage the people that were there to help them.
So a lot of real drop off in engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I've heard. I know that in this work in Texas that we've started doing, a lot of kids have not returned to school. It's a big drop off in attendance. So that's one of the challenges that we're going to be facing.
This is Abby. Working in the disability space. Distraction is so easy these days, and I know a lot of people are quick to blame like any young person for being distracted on the computer, but I will say I have found that as a person with ADHD myself, it's really hard sometimes when I have all of the internet in front of me to really be able to dive into the things that I'm doing. And I have a lot of coping strategies, but a lot of our young folks don't have that yet. So, or maybe they didn't know that they had this problem until it was online learning time. So,
yeah, it's a really different environment. I'm so glad that you actually referred to yourself. I appreciate that because it actually is a huge point. This isn't just about students or about opportunity youth. It's about you, right? It's about all of us that try to serve these populations that are vulnerable, because we're also vulnerable or can be vulnerable, and this is in fact the next point I simply wanted to make is that according to research, teachers' own social and emotional competencies influence the quality of the learning experiences of their students. So I think it's the environment that we're in now, whether it's online or just whatever it is, I think things have compounded the difficulties. And it's not just the pandemic. I think there are other things that longer term trends in disengagement that have been pretty clear to people who actually study it. It's easy to point to social media or other things. I don't know if there's a simple answer to why things seem to be harder than they were, but I do know that it's impacting not only students, but also educators and people who are and counselors and people in your position who are trying to support students at risk. So I just wanted to acknowledge that some of what I talk about is going to be relevant to you, and I'll try to point that out as we go. And again, I have to make reference to this work in Houston. We are starting our work with teachers, but we're not just diving in and work with students. If you go to CASEL, the CASEL website, do people know CASEL? CASEL, one of their big learnings over the years has been that you can't jump over the adults. If you care about social emotional learning, you have to build up adult competency. So we're taking that to heart. So if you feel comfortable, you can share in the chat. I'll share my story. I have tremendous difficulty meeting deadlines. Deadlines are actually, if they're externally imposed, for instance, this talk, that worked. very well. If it's internally imposed, if I try to set my own deadlines, terrible. So that's just my story. I'm not very organized, but I'm pretty good at setting goals. So, you know, we're all different. We all have a different mix of things that we struggle with, and nobody's perfect. Nobody has to be perfect. I do think it's valuable to not only understand your challenges, but also your strengths. And you can sometimes find workarounds for your challenges, or you can work with people who have strengths in areas that you don't have. That to me is the best thing. And I'm privileged to work with some great people who are very organized and who also set lots of deadlines. So in the chat, I'll take a quick peek. Thank you, Abby. I will meet a deadline pretty much every time, but I'll procrastinate until it's almost too late. So yeah, I feel that. Feel that. Cool. All right, thank you, and thank you for putting the SEL competence. Yeah, so they're a great organization and done tremendous work. Okay. In general, we're still thinking about why this matters, especially in this day and age with students who are at risk, and why it matters to you as a provider. I think in general, these kinds of things like meeting deadlines and keeping organized, that's just part of what executive functions do. And in fact, this is a list. It's actually taken from some research by Philip Zalazzo and others. It's really astounding what executive functions allow us to do. They allow us to sustain attention, to keep goals and information in mind. They help us refrain from responding immediately some of the time. They help us resist distraction, tolerate frustration. Importantly, they allow us to consider the consequences before we actually act on those. They help us reflect. They make it possible for us to reflect on past experiences and plan for the future. So, quite an impressive list. So executive functions really, in some sense, just to take a bit of a long view on this in terms of human history and human evolution, when we were simpler creatures millions of years ago, maybe we had one goal in mind, usually a goal involving approaching something that we wanted, maybe something to eat, or avoiding something that might put us at risk. And that kind of simple approach, avoidance idea with one goal at a time, or just not many goals to consider, that could be managed without executive function. But once we became very, very complicated with all the goals that we have, all the things we're capable of thinking, all the possibilities that we have, executive functions became really necessary. And as we dig into what executive functions are, I think you'll see what they do that makes it possible for us to basically manage the way we approach goals. So we'll dig right into that. So what are executive functions and what is self-regulation? Here's a definition. There are lots of definitions out there. This is one that I like. Executive functions are a specific set of attention regulation skills involved in conscious, goal-directed problem solving. This is from the same paper. You can find this work at the U.S. Department of Ed, by the way. I can also forward any of these resources. So what does this mean? So it's a set of skills. It's not just one thing. It's involved with attention regulation. So you may not think that, but these are very specific tools for regulating attention. And a really important point is that all of this applies to conscious goal-directed problem solving. So conscious control of what you think and do. So they apply when automatic pilot is not enough. So as you're going throughout your about your life throughout the day, there are a lot of things you do automatically. You don't even have to think about them. If you're taking a walk and there's a puddle on the ground, you might not even think about it. You're going to walk. You're going to try to avoid the puddle, right? You don't need executive functions for that, but you do need executive functions when you are faced with a situation, a problem that you're trying to solve that really requires conscious control. You have to actually devote mental resources to figure it out. And that's where executive functions. More specifically, there are 3 executive functions that people talk about. These are like the basic ones. Working memory, inhibitory control, cognitive flexibility. What do those mean? Working memory, that's your ability to hold relevant information in mind and manipulate it or update it. So back in the days when we didn't have smartphones and GPS, sorry, I should get a better example, right? If you were needed directions, you stop at a gas station, you get directions. You'd have to keep those directions in mind. You know, turn right, go a couple miles, turn left. That takes a working memory. But even more direct and on point, your ability to understand this conversation, this what I'm presenting, that requires executive functions and specifically working memory. Because you're building, as you're listening to me talk, you're building a representation of the meaning based on the words and the grammar that I'm using. And hopefully it's coherent. I apologize if it's not, but your ability to do that requires working memory. You have to piece together the content that I'm providing. So working memory is just fundamental in ways that we don't take for granted. Inhibitory control is probably pretty obvious to you. It's that ability to stop yourself from doing what you might be inclined to do in order to do what is maybe most needed or most. So think that slice of chocolate cake, right? Where you could have that chocolate cake, it would be delicious, but maybe you have a long-term goal to watch the cake. Or whenever you have this conflict between something that's in the moment that would be appealing or is desirable, but that conflicts with a longer term goal. So this is relevant to students all the time, right? Especially opportunity youth or adolescents, where they are weighing a variety of different possible goals. And some of those goals may have short-term gains or may be really something they want to do, but they may get in the way of those longer-term goals. So inhibitory control is something that helps them maybe not do some of the short-term, pursue those short-term goals, but just hang out with friends or what have you, in order to reach those goals. Finally, cognitive flexibility is the ability to change perspectives or approaches to a problem, or to flexibly shift focus from one object or task to another. You may be working with youth that are really struggling with particular problems, and I think one of the things that you want them to be able to do is to think more flexibly about them, and cognitive flexibility addresses that. Sometimes it means really reframing the problem or just thinking about it in a whole different way, thinking outside the box. That's cognitive. We'll give, I'll have some examples in a moment, but these are the three main components of executive function: working memory, inhibitory control, cognitive. So, what's self-regulation and what's the relationship between executive function and self-regulation? So we're gonna get into that just so you understand these terms. We have limited ability to change executive functions directly. And I can talk about some exceptions, but basically your working memory span is what it is. And there have been some studies that have people try to increase their working memory span, let's say using a computer program. Turns out they can do that, but only when they're working with that computer program. It's not like they're generally increasing their working memory capacity. Inhibitory control, again, you can probably train yourself to exercise some inhibitory control in specific instances, but it may not generalize. It may not be something that you can generally change. Cognitive flexibility may be an exception. May be the case that the more you know about a particular, let's say, domain or field or whatever context you care about, the more you know, the more cognitive flexibility you may have. Again, it's still sort of based on the context, but it seems more changeable. But you can change combinations that apply in particular situations. It's a broader set of self-regulation. So what is self-regulation? It's the means by which people manage control the regulation. So here, think planning, deliberate problem solving, reflective learning. So these are two different ideas that are closely related. We're going to hopefully clarify the difference. So first, let me give you a little bit of a picture here of one other thing I want to talk about around self-regulation, and this is the self-regulatory cycle. I know I'm throwing a lot of content at you, but I think this is going to be really useful. It's very useful in any learning context, and the basic idea is we don't just learn during a learning activity just by focusing on what is being thrown at us. There are phases involved. There are things that we do before a learning activity and after a learning activity that profoundly change the nature of our learning. And there's a cycle, self-regulatory cycle, that captures this. And it breaks it down into a before, during, and after phase. Zimmerman and Cleary talk about it as a forethought phase, a performance control phase, and a self-reflection phase. But it's basically just before, during, and after. And so why does this matter? Turns out, before you actually have an activity, a learning activity, or some experience where you're going to learn, if it's assuming that this is an intentional thing where you are the purpose is to actually engage in learning, you go through a process of setting a goal and actually planning for that goal. And those steps set you up for success as you engage in a task. You also experience a lot of other things that are called self-motivation beliefs. Actually, it's just a number of different things. So these are things like self-efficacy. How confident are you that you can actually do it? If kids or opportunity youth are given a goal or a challenge and they have very little confidence in their ability to do it, that's going to affect their ability to persevere and how much effort they actually apply. Other related beliefs are things like growth mindset versus fixed mindset. I don't know if people have heard of those terms, but those are so important as well. A lot of kids actually have a fixed mindset. A lot of educators do. They don't think it's possible to change their ability. If you don't actually deep down think you can change your ability, what is that going to do in terms of your willingness to pursue a? It really it can have a devastating effect. There are other kinds of beliefs that are involved here. I think part of it is also, when you anticipate a particular learning activity, what kind of affect do you have? Are you excited? Are you enthusiastic? Are you interested? If you're interested, excited, enthusiastic, that is going to bode well for the actual engagement. But if you're fearful, if you're anxious, that's not so good. So you can see this in any public education setting. There are times when kids faced with, let's say, a math lesson may be anxious or fearful or feeling like they don't want to engage in it. And that feeling, that emotion also has an effect on engagement. During the performance control phase, a lot is going on as well. Depending on the age of the student, they may or may not be able to do some monitoring or control of what's going on. This is usually something that takes practice. And what I've found is that kids don't necessarily have the skills. This is where it might be very helpful to provide some kind of scaffold or support. Like, is there something you can give them that's going to structure their learning? And I would not assume that kids actually have the tools that they need to actually, let's say, effectively monitor themselves and do sort of metacognitive work. So I'm thinking of things like checking their comprehension as they go, if they're reading, or if they're doing math work, checking their answer afterwards, are intentionally connecting what they're learning with what they've learned. Those are all very demanding kinds of things to do, and they're not obvious to us. And finally, the self-reflection phase is also very important. So that's when kids are hopefully reflecting on whether they've met the goal that was put before them. And really importantly, they may be making what's called a causal attribution. So what tends to happen for a lot of kids is that if they fail at a learning activity, whatever challenge it is, they will blame themselves. They will attribute their failure to their own capacity. And you can sort of see this may go along with a fixed mindset, the idea that they can't possibly learn. They may also have low self-efficacy. So all of these things kind of hang together sometimes. But that kind of attribution where you blame yourself can be pretty destructive. And the reason it's destructive is because once you make that kind of attribution, it's not just about the learning activity you just went through. It influences the next one, because this is a cycle. To put it in other kinds of terms, cognitive terms, when kids or opportunity youth face a situation, a learning situation, they don't come in with a blank slate. They actually have pretty well developed memories about what to expect in a situation. In fact, humans in general are always predicting what's going to happen. It's part of some new science that's been really coming to the fore. Always predicting, and in this case, maybe predicting how things are going to go in terms of the way they're going to feel, the way what they're going to be thinking about, how they're going to act. So those long-term memories can be relatively adaptive and useful, or they can be really maladaptive. So I can tell you, when I was a student, especially in high school, I had some fairly maladaptive beliefs. I blamed myself a lot. And I distinctly remember coming to terms with that and deciding that I didn't want to be that way. Now, I didn't really know what to do about it, but I knew that it wasn't helping, right? And I don't think I'm alone. I think a lot of students go through this. So much better for students that if they fail to think, okay, the reason I failed is because I used a strategy that wasn't effective. Or maybe there was a barrier in the environment that made it hard. That's something that Cass thinks about a lot. Either way, it's better to think about failure in terms of specific strategies or a barrier than to think that it has something to do with your innate ability. And relatedly, much better to think about, have the belief that you can grow, that you have a growth mindset, and other related beliefs. So these are things that are all part of self-regulation, not executive function. So you can, I hope, begin to see that self-regulation is a broader idea. And it's not just about those three components. It's about a lot of different things that are going on, all to help us reach our goals. I'm going to take a break and see how people are doing. Are there questions about everything? Because I feel like it's a lot of content.
I have a question, and I don't want to make this too focused on my own particular thing, but I'll start that way and we'll see if it's general or not. We have AmeriCorps members who are ending their year. Some are not ending successfully in the sense that they didn't complete their service hours. They didn't complete the tasks we gave them. When it is, I'm struggling with how to separate that from innate ability. Like, do we point out specific circumstances that could have changed? Is it action versus personal attributes? Is that what you're trying to separate to really focus in on that growth mindset and help them keep learning?
I think it's partly, there are going to be kids that have, there may be issues going on. They may have 504 plans, or they may have, disabilities that are documented. And I'm not saying that those shouldn't be recognized. They should be. And there should be supports and scaffolds in place. And I think that's part of what we all want to do, at least in this group. But the belief system that students have, as far as I know, having a fixed mindset is generally never helpful, because I think even aspects of personality, for instance, you might think, well, people are just the way they are in terms of their personality. It turns out you can actually change that as well. Yes, we are born with a certain temperament, but that temperament gets radically modified and changed through early experience, so that ultimately the weight of experience is really important. So I'm not saying that there aren't individual differences that are that are real. There are, but the more I think people are learning, the more they see that you can work around those in a variety of different ways. So, and I just don't think it's productive to sort of take that stance where you're focusing on some of those differences. I guess what I'm also saying is that I definitely believe in not in a deficit approach, but in a strengths-based one, where you are sort of thinking about everything that a student can bring to a learning situation. And if a strategy doesn't work, maybe there's a different strategy or a different set of supports or a different set of circumstances that are going to work for that student. So the opportunity youth that you're talking about, so they've had a setback, they've had some failure in this current term, or whatever the frame is. I do think it's so important to sort of, excuse my dogs, talk to them to understand how they're reflecting on that, how they're processing it, and to try to help them think about it in a way that's going to be more productive going forward. And I know it's easy for me to say, I know, but I would encourage you to have that conversation with them and to see if you can engage them on that, because my guess is they're probably feeling pretty down about it.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? Okay. Well, why don't we? Oh, go ahead.
I was processing very slow from Laura and all of that. Just to follow up kind of on what she said, and then we can move on. One of the people that I'm thinking of that she may have been talking about probably was an opportunity youth at one point in time, but are now probably in their 50s and have never had a great self-regulatory cycle, right? Like their executive functioning areas are probably very low, and they don't have a lot of self-efficacy. And so as they're exiting their term, to look back on this 12-month commitment where they've not met the goals set before them, what you're kind of saying is saying, okay, here's what you've done this year, and here's maybe the strategy that you said you used to plan your time, like seeing together that didn't work, and then creating a strategy of what could work maybe in the next year or going forward. So looking back on, okay, in December when you were behind on your hours, like helping them to reflect on how they were feeling then and try to change it, but maybe then that didn't work, to kind of plan to be productive forward, because we're hoping after this next year of serving with us to get them out into the workforce again and be able to do some of these things effectively.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think, and I think you have it right. I think you can't do too much about what has happened in some sense. I think helping them understand in more deep, instead of just blaming themselves, what is it that they tried to do? And it may be the case, getting back to what I said at the beginning of the cycle, if they didn't really understand the goal thoroughly and they didn't sort of analyze it to sort of have a particular strategy in mind, it may have been very difficult for them to reach. It may, for this particular individual, it sounds like if they don't have great sort of executive function skills, they may have gotten off track as they were trying to do this work. Perhaps there are tools that they can use to help keep them on track in terms of just keeping organized, keeping to a particular schedule, having check-ins with you or with others to really help them manage that, because that may be something that it sounds like that may be something that they do need some support. And then I would say beginning in next year, before they launch into a whole nother year, I guess I would try to get them to think about what they would change from last year. I would ask them, I would try to get them to understand and engage in that deeper level of planning, and maybe get a little bit into their beliefs about whether they think they can change and how confident they are that they can do it. And if they're not confident, why? I mean, so I think there's some digging that has to happen. It may not even be the case that their beliefs are mutually consistent. There may be all sorts of contradictions when you're working with, especially with young kids, but even adults. You sometimes find lots of self-contradiction there. I don't think that's at all unusual. I think humans in general are very complex and not necessarily consistent with themselves. So I think that's just part of human nature. So I think what I'm saying is just help them process this in a way to set them up for success. Because if you do, what'll happen is they'll be focused on their particular strategy. Maybe they'll begin to believe that they can change. It's kind of baby steps. And the other thing is they have really low self-efficacy. Maybe maybe what they're taking on is a bit too much. So I don't think that's and I say that because I think you want to get them to the point where they're actually building their self-efficacy and feel confident. And instead of diving into the deep end, maybe it's a smaller chunk that they can. So I don't know if this is helpful, but I think it's a longer term plan, and I think sometimes you have to think about that to help.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I think we've this is just a little sort of comprehension check. I think we've been talking about it. The reason I like this slide is it puts the definitions together, and we talked about the definition, both definitions. And just to highlight this one point, executive functions are about these different skills that manage attention. Self-regulation is broader, so it involves those beliefs. It involves all that processing that we do as we learn and go throughout life. It also involves habits, which is another interesting aspect, because if self-regulation is how we actually reach our goals, it turns out that some of the best ways for reaching our goals involve having good habits. So for the kids that you work with or the adults that you work with, maybe there are some habits that kind of undermine their ability to get what they want done. And there are a lot of maladaptive habits that people have, whether it involves addictive behavior or just things that they do that kind of undermine their ability to reach their goals. I do it. I think everyone does it. You can't maybe not change all of these habits, but if you can put in place some positive habits that are going to help people reach their goals, that's even more effective than having them try to, let's say, inhibit a desire to goof off in the moment, because we all goof off in the moment. There are distractions. Life is complicated. If you can help people get into routines that support their self-regulation, that can sometimes be the best approach. So there's a lot of work on this, which I can share, successful ways to do this for students and for others as well. So just a thought. So let's talk a little bit about some of the specific strategies, and we'll actually come back to some of the habits and the other approaches. So how can we support executive functioning and self-regulation? Some of this I've already kind of alluded to, and it's not going to be a huge surprise, but I'm going to want to share at least some resources and maybe dig into this a little bit. So based on what I've shared, a lot of it is about setting yourself up for success. We talked about what happens as you plan for goals. You set goals and you plan for them. And it's going to, and I should say, part of goal setting and planning involves thinking about those beliefs. A lot of those are around how people feel about their competence. One of the things that we haven't talked about is the values that people have. And let me say a little bit about that, because that's really important. So in an educational setting, typically we care about interest and relevance. In compulsory education, kids are thrown in, they may not be interested in what is being taught. They may not see the relevance. The same with opportunity youth, depending on what kind of program they're engaged in. They may not feel that it's very interesting. They may not see its relevance. The more you can actually do, kind of build up the interest and the relevance, the more it's going to actually help them stay engaged. And it's less about the persistence and more about the kind of how they feel about the activity. Because if a student or youth is interested in something at the outset and that carries through, it's likely that they're going to have a positive experience during the activity. And at the end of the activity, as they reflect on it, that is going to influence how they kind of the sort of the long-term message that they take away from it. I enjoyed this, it was fun. If they think it's relevant, all the better. So that's important. So I don't want to neglect to talk about that. Performance monitoring, I'm not going to say too much about it. It can sometimes be difficult to do. I would certainly worry about the pieces at the beginning and the end before I worry about the performance monitoring so much. I think an exception might be, we were just talking about someone who needs executive function supports, where I do think if you know that they need something to keep them on track, I would absolutely provide it. But if you don't know that, I would probably start with the pieces that come before and after. Because oftentimes those pieces themselves can make the biggest difference, and maybe all that you need. Reflection is huge. Having people reflect on whatever it is they're doing and thinking about it and taking away some meaning is important. And also surfacing some of the attributions they may be making that may not be helpful. So actually having them think to themselves, well, why didn't that work if it didn't work? Because you'll be surprised. A lot of people will immediately go to themselves, blame themselves. And so you might, again, it's really a good idea to surface that and try to change those beliefs, because I just don't think they help. Some of all of this is, it's really about general abilities to set goals and reflect effectively. there are some additional challenges that apply to specific disciplines. And I'll talk a little bit about that. I don't know how relevant it is for this group, but I'll mention a few specifics. So I'm just going to provide some information about supports for goal setting and planning and reflection. And then I'll have some other things to say about developing some of these skills. So for goals, I would say aim for clear learning goals that are relevant to your students or to the opportunity youth that you're working. If they fail, it may be because the goal wasn't clear. Yeah, or that it was, you know, it may have seemed clear, but making sure that it's clear and actually doing some planning on the basis of it, strategizing, like how are you going to approach that goal, I think is really important. What we have found at CAST is that to a really surprising extent, a lot of the difficulties that students have, it's because the goal isn't clear. Sometimes it's because there isn't a clear distinction between the goal and the means of achieving the goal. This is an important UDL point, and you may have, I know you've probably heard it from Allison, but I'll make it again because it's so important. You have variability is the norm, right? You've got youth that are all over the place in terms of their abilities, or students that learn in very different ways or have different ways that they approach problems. Try to, if possible, whatever control you have over the situation, separate the goals. What is actually the point of what they're doing from the means, how they're going to get there. And if you have the ability to provide alternate paths to reach that goal, and those work for the youth, provide them. As we all don't, one size does not fit all. We all don't like approach things in the same way. It's good to have that separation between goals. So there's a link there which has more discussion of learning goals and makes the same. The other thing is, if self-efficacy is low, especially, break down complex learning goals into smaller chunks. That does a number of things. It makes the goals easier to understand because they're smaller pieces. It makes it easier for youth to actually reach the goals, which is going to be the best thing for their self-efficacy. So I'm guessing that for this population and many vulnerable populations, self-efficacy is pretty low, depending on what the domain has. The only way to really build that self-efficacy is to have them experience mastery. To have them experience mastery, I don't think you want to throw a really complex goal at them. I think you want a small, manageable goal. You can get more complex as time goes, but you want to give them that feeling of experiencing mastery, and you want to give them mastery-oriented feedback. The mastery-oriented feedback is going to be very helpful. It's not only going to help them actually reach their goals, but it's also going to give them a different kind of goal orientation. You may have heard the terms mastery versus performance goal orientation. Sometimes students think in the language of skills, but they're really interested in learning skills, math skills, reading and writing skills. That's great. They're really focused on learning the nuts and bolts of whatever it is that's being thrown at them. Or if they're in a new job situation, they may be interested in learning, what are the skills that I need to do this job well? Other kids and adults they kind of think about competence in terms of, in a kind of a social way. How do they compare to others? And sometimes that's reinforced in certain classrooms or in certain work environments. So in that case, that performance goal orientation, it can be some people thrive on that, depending on their personality, but oftentimes it can turn into a big negative, and it can lead to kind of avoidance. If you're comparing yourself to others and you're not doing well, you may not want to engage. You may want to avoid that situation. So, I know I'm sort of rambling on here a bit, but that this is all about mastery-oriented feedback, which I think is part of what you want to do with, again, building self-efficacy and encouraging good mindsets. So sorry for the digression. There's another link around brief instruction steps and how you can break goals down. Here's another, here is I do have a slide on performance and monitoring. This is going to really speak to kids who have maybe working memory issues, or just may want the support. Honestly, I think whether you've got working memory issues or not, there are a lot of kids that really benefit from models for how to sort of collect information or put it together. So there's some great links here. UDL on campus has a few things around executive functioning, but I really like this material from William and Mary. It's a huge collection of graphic organizers, which again, I don't know if they apply to the work that you're, to some of the work that you're doing, but if you can provide that kind of support or scaffold to students, or to opportunity youth rather, they're going to maybe able to more effectively reach their goals. There's another link here that's specifically about supporting students with working memory difficulties. So these are just resources that may or may not be applicable, but if they are, I'm happy to provide it. Schema-based instruction, that's specifically about math. It's a specific approach, so may not apply here. But again, it's a very scaffolded approach, using a kind of a graphic organizer approach to help kids with who are struggling in math. So these are some potentially useful tools. Finally, reflection. So again, whether you're in a formal setting or not, make time for reflection, provide time and guidance for it. There's some links there about how to do that. It's really helpful to go through a formal process of reflection with students or with people that you are trying to counsel, opportunity youth. Ask them how things, not only how they went, how it made them feel. Did they reach their goal? Is it going to make them want to do it again in the future? Why or why not? So I'll kind of dig in and try to make sense of exactly how they're processing it. That'll help you sort of plan ahead for the next step. The other thing is, as they reflect, help them develop self-awareness. So self-aware, and there's some approaches here. Wise feedback, sort of concrete, actionable feedback. Mindfulness, probably heard about quite a bit, which can be very helpful, especially if youth are thinking about all sorts of other things while they're in their, in a situation where they maybe should be focusing more. Self-awareness itself is really critical. It is actually one of the this is just a quote. experience is not the best teacher. It's reflection on experience that makes it educational. So that's one of my favorite quotes. George Foreman here he's an educator. It's not, this is not the boxer or salesman. It's a different George Foreman. It'd be kind of fun if it were the same. But so reflection on experience makes it. But I wanted to say a little bit about how you develop self-regulatory capacity. So if you go to the CASEL website, as you know, they're the CASEL core competencies, and self-awareness is like the first one. And it's the first one because it is the first step in developing self-regulatory capacity. So the work we're doing in Texas, that's where we begin. Are kids aware of their emotions? Are they, but even not just being aware of emotions or social interactions, are they aware of their beliefs? Are they aware of their mindset? Are they aware of their self-efficacy? Their confidence? Are they aware of what they're attributing failure to? So all of the things that I've been talking about in that self-regulatory cycle, those can all be the focus of self-awareness. Because self-awareness itself is just a general concept, it's just this idea of being aware, it's self-focused attention, right? In itself, it doesn't tell you much, but once you use it as a lens to sort of think about particular ideas, particular beliefs or emotions, or social interactions, then it becomes very powerful. Because what it does is it makes it possible for you to change things that maybe you want to change, but you can't change what you don't understand or what you don't. So you have to build that self-awareness. So it's no mistake that it's a core competency of CASEL, and that it's actually a fundamental principle of most SEL programs. And it's actually in line with sort of an approach that's sort of cognitive behavioral in nature. You think about cognitive behavioral therapy, where those kinds of approaches that rely on talking to a patient, for instance, talking to a student, they are there to develop self-awareness around particular problems or challenges. The hope being that once a certain amount of understanding is obtained, then they can be changed. Now, of course, you need to have particular ways of changing them, strategies, approaches, tools, support, scaffolds, whatever it is, but you can't get there until you build the self. So the self-awareness is critical. And I would say one way to begin to develop that in practical terms is to focus on the reflection, because that's a natural place for self-awareness. But then as you go forward, maybe people will begin to be a little bit more aware at the outset of an activity, right? And who knows, maybe eventually during the activity itself. So all of this takes lots of time and effort. It takes exposure to tools. It takes a support system. So I don't want to sugarcoat it, but I do think that what you can get out, if you do this sort of work over time, is someone who really understands the way they think and act and feel, and who can actually do something. So they've become self-regulated or more self-regulated. And they may be a self-regulated learner in the sense that they can take on new learning challenges and they can manage their own way to learn. And I think that's the most you can absolutely ask of an educational system or a system that's trying to support opportunity youth, that you're giving them the tools to make their own way. So I do think it's important to to give them the tools in the moment, but also to give them the tools that are going to help them develop their own capacity. So I will leave it at that, and I'll stop sharing. We can go back to some slides, but I think it might be fun to sort of open things up and just have a discussion. I know I just threw a ton of information at you. Maybe things that ways of thinking about people that you're not used to in terms of beliefs and, all these different pieces that make up self-regulation. So I'll stop talking, and let me if you have questions, feel free to ask. Are there some particular problems of practice that you're facing as you work with some of the opportunity youth that you think either do or do not fit into anything that I said? I'm pretty casting the net pretty wide there.
Well, I don't want to speak for the group, Jess, but I will say that, so maybe if this just helps prompt folks or move it, one of the pieces that is coming up, it seems like over and over is a level of self-regulation around anger and rage, right? And that's a thread that, from a starting place, it's not like, all the young people coming through the door, I think we understand are, while we may see the Buddha in all of them, and each other, it feels like one of the things that folks have expressed on these calls, and even the folks that weren't able to join us today and may have had to drop off, is this is a steady stream of sort of very quicker than ever to escalation, right? And so I think that there's the long-term conversations, but there's like a real need for like everyone's feeling their toolkits tested around diffusing in the moment, right? And trying to link it back. So I don't know if I did a very good job of capturing that or putting it out for folks, but feel free to jump in and shape that in a way that's useful. But people definitely feel like it goes from extra 0 to 1,000, right? Yeah. At a faster pace than even maybe it was just 3 years ago. It seems like we're hearing. So
I will say a lot of the work that I've done is really in typical educational contexts where you certainly do have anger come up and disruptive behavior in that context. But I do think this is where having somebody who's more of an expert in working with opportunity youth around self-regulation is important. There are certainly techniques that are, I think, effective. So mindfulness sorts of techniques. But I would say it's still a matter of having a conversation, and I would say a one-on-one conversation, obviously with with opportunity youth to understand what it is. So for instance, one of the approaches that we have used in conjunction with the self-regulation work is called collaborative and proactive solutions. So you could look up that, or Lives in the Balance. That's kind of the name of the organization. This is work that was originally founded by Ross Green and Greene. And he had a number of books a few years ago called The Explosive Child, for instance. So a lot of working with a lot of students in a variety of settings, family settings, educational settings, hospital settings, around oppositional defiant behavior, around a lot of anger. And so the approach that he takes is to get underneath the emotion, which is completely consistent with what I've been talking about, where yes, there is emotion in the classroom. Classrooms are very emotional places, but what you want to do is get to underneath it to understand the belief systems and the goal and the expectations that are kind of driving it. Because in his work, a lot of this anger comes about through what he calls unsolved problems. So these are typically unmet expectations or in some cases lagging skills. But the unmet expectations are really interesting because oftentimes there's a mismatch between the expectation that the student or the youth has and the educator or supervisor or whoever is the brunt of the anger. And it's important that if the anger is being directed at a person or in a particular situation, that the person who is most that the conversation happened between the youth and the person who is most able to address the anger, as opposed to being sent to somebody else to address anger that arose in a situation that they have no insight over. So it's important that the people involved in that conversation be a party to it and understand the situation. And he has a process called a Plan B conversation where you work through step by step to collaboratively understand what's going on to meet those expectations. So I do think there are approaches, they do go beyond what I've talked about, but they actually dovetail nicely with what I'm talking about, at least in formal educational settings. But I would say this is a case where you probably need to think about a more targeted approach in terms of MTSS, you like that kind of thing. Sounds like more of a tier 2, tier 3 kind of thing. I hate to put labels on it, but it's kind of a little bit beyond the kind of general ideas that I've been talking about, even though I think the general ideas are important. Another group that we work with is Check and Connect, which is a mentoring program. This is for kids who are disengaged, could be, certainly fall into the opportunity youth category, where they have a 2-year mentoring program between mentors and youth, and working on some of the same ideas, very much cognitive behavioral kind of approach, trying to work on perseverance, responsible decision making, and whatnot. I know less about that approach, but I'm going to be learning more about it. Again, less for the general population and more to help the kids, the youth that need it. So I guess my short answer is you probably need to think of about a more focused approach, but regardless, it's not about the anger so much as what's underneath the anger. There's something underneath the anger. Anger is always tied to a specific situation. There's something that's triggering it. So you can try to resolve the anger if you like, but you're not resolving the problem. You're just getting rid of the anger in the moment. So you're better off trying to understand what's driving the anger. And it could be pretty complex, but I think that's what you have to do. I don't know if that helps. That's kind of my general take on it. But it's a great question, and that helps me understand. So again, it's not a group. I don't work with Opportunity Youth. There are other people at CAST who do a lot more work, but my focus is on self-regulation. So I hope some of what I said is helpful, but I do think there's a huge, probably a big need at CAST and other places to think about, okay, that's all great, self-regulation in general. How are you going to help us with the kids that we're working with? Like, how do you help us with a kid who's autistic or who has other issues going on? None of what I said is really specific to different populations, though some of what I've said could work for them. I think you may need additional strategy. Other questions or comments?
So I'm trying to envision some of the conversations that leads to them helping someone surface their own emotions or kind of digging in on things. The mental place I get stuck envisioning that is when I think of Opportunity Youth, I think of them not engaging, and I think of them not engaging even deep conversations about what does that mean to you, or what, the kind of things that would lead to that surfacing those internal dimensions. Any thoughts on that? Like how to help engage someone who's disengaged in that sense?
Yeah. So if someone is really disengaged, they may not be, they're probably they may just be sort of like completely tuned out in terms of what it is you want to ask them about. And I don't know obviously don't know the details. If they're in a work setting and they seem to be having trouble staying employed, or it's an educational context they're not attending, they're not, we know they're not engaged. They may be putting up quite a barrier, quite a barrier to others trying to understand that. So I do get it. Now, I'm not a therapist. I haven't trained in cognitive behavioral therapy. So I don't have great suggestions. I do know that Ross has a very specific protocol for working with students. There are things he doesn't ask. There are things he does ask. He even scripts it. To some extent. He provides particular stems. And he's had success in getting kids to open up, because some of the kids that he works with are similar. They probably don't want to, the last thing they want to do is open up. In fact, they probably had lots of experience not opening up when asked by a bunch of other people. So I think there is a trick to it. I think there are some real skills involved in making this happen. So my answer is not to say it's impossible, but to say probably to figure out what some of the best practices are around this and to try them. Again, Ross Green may be one source, but there may be others. And specifically looking for how do you help someone open up who isn't opening up. The other thing is some of the issues that you're trying to get them to talk about, some of the situations you may or may not be privy to. So again, I know you have a particular role and a particular job, but if somebody is sending, if you're talking to this youth out of that context, it may be hard for you to understand exactly what's going on, or it may be, or they may feel like it's pointless to, it's so hard to know what exactly is going on. That's why I say it's best if the people who are actually party to the situation can have that conversation. But that's not the way our systems are set up. I understand that. We tend to have other people come in and do that support, which isn't all bad, but it may not help solve some of the problems, or maybe less efficient. Or so I wish I had something more positive to say, but I do think it's possible to get even the most reticent youth to open up. I'm through particular skills and training. So that's my sense. But I'm sure there are cases that are so hard that it's I gotta say, I respect everyone on this call for doing the hard work that they do. And it does make me feel like an armchair psychologist, because I have the luxury of, saying all of this stuff. And yeah, there's evidence for it, and we've seen that it works in real situations, but maybe not the situations that you face day in and day out. So I do respect everyone.
In the last few minutes, we've lost a bunch of folks. They all had to get back to work. So it looks like, David, you've just popped a question into the chat. We have a comment from Kathy. Thank you, Kathy Taylor. So Jess, I don't know if you could see it. I'll just read these out to you. Okay. Kathy Taylor writes, when we see a young person struggling with behavior or motivation, our experience and training teaches us to ask, I wonder what SEL skills they are lacking, because humans would be successful if they could. Then we use specific interaction strategies to intervene and make plans to teach the specific skills they are lacking. And David, you just posed, what trauma has the students experienced in their life? This is what I am going to be looking at to better serve and engage an individual. Creating a growth mindset environment is important.
Yeah, I think both of these are great comments. And the I do think they're lagging skills that are part of the story sometimes, and maybe quite often. I also think that sometimes it's just a mismatch of expectations. So I don't think it's Cass were fond of saying the barrier is in the environment. I would say, more technically, the barrier is an interaction between the environment and the student. The student is bringing something to the equation, but it's not just the student. It's something else that is not working. So yes, sometimes it is about skills that are lacking, and in some cases, what we wouldn't necessarily expect them to have the skills, like they're not obvious. Like a lot of the metacognitive skills that go into engagement and monitoring and sort of being able to be flexible in the moment, those are not obvious. Those have to be taught and practiced. So I do think that teaching skills is absolutely important. Trauma, of course. There's so much trauma, and we talk about it's easy. So in the classroom setting, I'm talking as if issues always arise because of what's happening. And we know that's not true, right? We know that students in a classroom setting may be thinking about what was happening at home that morning. right? And I'm sure with Opportunity Youth, it's the same thing. And not only that, there may be some very deep trauma that is affecting the way they respond in situations. So earlier I said there's temperament and then lots of experience that builds on that. So this is work by Carol Dweck and others. Carol Dweck has done a lot of work in growth mindset. Yeah, there's very compelling evidence that a lot of these patterns that are not particularly adaptive that people have, they may come from early trauma, or at least early, just the experiences that kids have had over many, many years. And so they have a very specific way of responding in particular contexts. It's hard to change. And it may be rooted, if not in trauma, in a lot of early experience. In some cases, it's trauma. I mean, so yeah, I think that is hugely important. And I haven't even touched on that. So there again, I think you probably need a targeted approach to understand the trauma. I think therapy that is focused on that is obviously what you need. I think therapy can be very helpful. So those are great. Great comments. I agree completely. I think they're both so relevant. So, and yeah, growth mindset. I did notice that it's absolutely one interesting thing about growth mindset, since you mentioned growth mindset context, there's good evidence that you can change growth mindset for students. But interesting, very importantly, if the teacher or the environment does not support growth mindset, those interventions don't work, or at least they're not as effective. So you can't just tell students that there's neuroplasticity and that we're always capable of learning and leave it at that. It's much more complicated. Yeah, right. You certainly have to support it in a number of different ways at the student level or at the youth level, but you have to ask yourself and look at the environment itself and sort of see, well, what is the message that's being sent here? And if it's not consistent with growth mindset, don't be surprised if there aren't changes in that on that score. So it's complicated, right? So, well, thank you very much to everyone. I enjoyed it. I hope it was useful. I look forward to hearing more about this group and following what you're doing. And I'm glad I could be supportive. And I'm also happy to share any resources and continue to be in touch. So thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate you inviting me, and hope that this was a valuable session for the group.
Thank you so much, Jess. We are just really grateful for you pulling this information together, for taking the time to say, sure, I'll come on for a couple hours and talk to a group that I don't really know at all, right? So we're ever so grateful to all of you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being engaged and dropping information into chat. We will, Jess, I assume you're okay with sharing your PowerPoint, so we will get
sure.
that out to the group along with the recording of the session. And then, as always, if you think of follow-up pieces, just even this growth mindset little exchange that happened in the chat alone, we can go, Kathy and I will go back and we will find different pieces because, we've done deep dives around so many of these different elements over time, but it's always really helpful to be like, when folks say, actually, it would be great. Let's revisit that, right?
Yep.
And so we will absolutely do that along the way. If, as you're thinking about all of this, if there's more or different angles that you would like, we are happy to try to figure out how to get that information to you all. And then for those of you that are on that are new to this, a huge thank you to Beth for sharing. And I think the other folks that shared have had to hop off, but you know, again, just want to extend this wide open invitation to join our monthly calls. And all you have to do is just pop me your emails and I will make sure that you get added to the invitation list. And it is, you know, come as you are, come as you can, you know, and join with colleagues from around the country. That's our goal. So massive thanks to all of you. For those of you that are at all, you know, in the wildfire path right now, speaking as someone that's sitting in northern Vermont, you know, I hope that you're taking care of yourself. For those of you that are on, like our Chaba folks that have been, I just have to say it's a sobering that have lived through many wildfires. Kathy and crew, I have to say, this is incredibly sobering experience for us on the West Coast to realize, you know, sort of maybe a little bit more viscerally what your life experiences are. So just recognizing that for everyone, and New Mexico as well, as I sort of glance at the grid here and realize the geographies we have. But anyway, all of that is to say, it's also the start of summer. I know some of you have been in it longer than others, particularly our friends in Texas and New Mexico. But for some of us, we're like, look at this, you know, summer is happening. So, you know, consume lots of popsicles and ice cream and treat yourselves well and, you know, enjoy the sunshine when you can. And we will see you next month. And just a reminder, for those, and let me pull my calendar up, for those of you that are also part of the learning community, the rural, led by Circle, the team at Circle, that is the civic engagement or rural and native youth. Normally that call is the third Monday of the month. It is, because of June 19th, it has been rescheduled this month to Wednesday, June 21st at 2:00. Everyone should have the invite to that. If you'd like to join the Circle learning community, we're focusing on strategies for building civic engagement with rural and native youth. Then you are more than welcome. Again, just let me know, but just to flag that for everyone. And otherwise, we will see you next month. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jess.